Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Roll Call. But before we get into actual character, we got to talk about something. We got to talk about artificers, because for those of you who are not initiated into D&D, you might have the question, what is an artificer? Well, basically, an artificer is a way to kind of have magic-coded technology in your game. So, this is the artificer to kind of be the black sheep of the classes in 5th edition, and one of the reasons we're doing this is because the Artificer is not in the player's handbook. The Artificer in 5e made its debut in Eberron, Rising from the Last War, and it's kind of a steampunk setting, for lack of a better term. So they have a lot of like magic-based technology. So like you can have like a tram, and maybe it runs on electricity that's generated through magic, or maybe it just runs on magic itself. So it's kind of weird. And then the other time they've put the Artificer out there was in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So we're doing something that's like we're doing a lot of backwards compatibility here. So here's the thing: is a lot of DMs, and again, this is going to vary from table to table, game to game, and DM to DM. But there are DMs out there who absolutely hate the Artificer because they want to run, high fantasy settings that, don't have things like guns, technology, stuff like that. At the same time, even if you're not necessarily doing that setting, some settings might have guns, some settings might not have guns. Like if you're doing a dark fantasy where, it's people hunting a vampire, you might not want guns in there. You might want, people doing the traditional, like, stake, crossbows, more medieval weapons. And that's fine. So, as with all things, talk to your DM. See if you want to play an Artificer. Talk to your DM about the setting, and talk about how you want to flavor the Artificer. Because while the Artificer is, magic coded as technology, it doesn't have to be that way. So like what you'll see here is that a lot of the Artificer's abilities are things like putting an enchantment on a shield that like boosts your AC, or putting an enchantment on your boots that let you walk more or have a faster move speed, things like that. But it doesn't say that it has to be technology. So you could have the same Artificer in several different settings, and like let's say you wanted to do like almost like a primitive setting. You could easily have an Artificer who like has like maybe wood for armor, and what they do is like they carve like runes onto the side that are magic, and that's what allows them to do these things. Or some other form of technology or form of like magic that's basically more like putting things together. And it's kind of interesting because like I think a good example of this kind of thing where people do artificers is Legend of Korra. It's a very steampunky thing. So like if you think about like one of the things they do in Legend of Korra is like there is a lot of modern technology. Like there's cars, there's electricity. But the thing is, the reason they have those things so quickly after being like in the last Airbender, where there wasn't that much technology, like the most modern technology was iron ships, and those were by no means like the norm for all the nations. It was the norm for the Fire Nation, and specifically the Fire Nation military. So, but that's a good example because you get people that bend lightning, and that's a very profitable thing. Like if you have something that's powered on electricity, so you'll see like in the first season, one of the characters uses their lightning bending, and all it is like a bunch of lightning benders, and like they shoot their lightning at like this orb that conducts the electricity to the rest of the town. So that's a good example. It's not that the electricity is not that the electrical system isn't technology or that it doesn't come from magic. It's kind of the two working together. So these are all things to just kind of keep in mind as you're designing an Artificer, because there are plenty of ways to flavor an Artificer to meet any particular setting. But you have to talk to your DM. I am not of the opinion that there's some settings where you just never want Artificers. There's a way to put artificers in every setting, but you have to flavor it right. Because like if your DM wants to do like that prehistoric kind of jungle setting, it's going to be really weird if like your gnome shows up and he has like goggles and a jetpack and like a laser gun, and that's just going to ruin the setting. You don't want that. But you can still have those things. You just have to code them differently to fit the setting. So with that, we are going to get into our artificers. Alright, so to start with our artificer, I kind of outsourced, the picking of the species to Blue Sky, and someone recommended doing a fairy artificer, or as they like to call it, a Tinker Belle, which I thought was clever. We're not going to name them that, but we're going to kind of go with it, and I think that's actually a nice way, because people think fairies, they think nature, they think magic. So I think it's one of those things where it's interesting to use that and play against type, the same way you might have like a really smart orc wizard, when typically orcs are thought of as the fighters, or like maybe the paladins if you want a more traditional like civilized orc. So I went ahead. Oh, wrong button. So I went ahead. I went with the Arabic name table for the first name. And I did that because, I looked up some, lore about fairies, and, on Wikipedia they mentioned that, like, the stories of fairies might have originated from Persia, and I forget what they were called, but, it's one of those things where they think, like, the story started there and then, made its way into Europe. So I went with the Arabic name trees. We have Saddia. But then I did want like a very kind of like fairy fantasy name, so I went with the gnome last name table because fairies themselves are not in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So her name is going to be Saddia Albaratie, and that is a gnome name, so it's completely made up. So I don't care if I'm mispronouncing that. Species is going to be fairy. Class is going to be artificer. Now, there's three types of artificers. You have the alchemist, which is basically the black sheep of the artificers, because it's kind of lackluster, to be honest. Like you don't get a whole lot of good things from being an alchemist. You can still play one if you want, but just be aware you might not be as effective as the other classes. It's something that I still kind of hope that they address in like another 5e book. Honestly, they probably should have put the artificer in the player's handbook and just made them official, but what do I know? Then for the other subclasses, you have the armorer, and that's kind of like your Iron Man type artificer. Like you build your armor, and then as you go into the subclass, you can like turn it into like a stealth armor or like a protector armor. You can use like intelligence for your strength checks if you got the protector armor. It's, again, it's basically Iron Man. Pretty much it's like the difference between choosing the power armor in Fallout New Vegas and choosing the stealth armor in Fallout New Vegas. Then you have the artillerist, and this is basically just a gunslinger. It's a gunslinger in so many ways. It's all about basically range attacks, and then you even get like a little. You get something that you can either use as a second gun or use as a turret. I will tell you how I want to flavor it later, because this is going to be an artillerist. And then the last one is the battlesmith, which basically is you have a mechanical pet that follows you around and obeys your orders and, does all that fun stuff. So again, if you want to have like a battle pet, then that's going to be the way to go. And of course, our level is going to be 3. We're always going to do level 3. For armor proficiencies, now here's where it's interesting, because you actually do get armor proficiencies as a artificer. You get light, medium, and shields. So one popular thing to do is if you're a wizard and you don't necessarily want to be popping on mage armor all the time or anything like that, is you take one level dip into artificer, you get your armor, and then now you're a wizard that can wear medium armor. And that's perfectly fine. And again, depending on how many levels your campaign is going to go to, you may or may not want to do that because like if you're going all the way from 1 to 20, you might be missing out on like that last level 20 capstone feature. But at the same time, if you don't feel that's worth it and you'd rather have the armor, by all means, take a level of Artificer. But again, for the purpose of this, we are just doing it as pure Artificer. Weapons is just simple weapons, because in the end, you are basically just a wizard. But I would say, especially since an Artificer is not necessarily going to be using weapons too much, like they will, but you'll kind of see how they do it in this one. But you could easily do things like you could easily flavor it as like just have like a light hammer, and that's like the hammer that you use to like smith stuff. So now for background, I'm just pulling from the player's handbook backgrounds. I don't want a backwards compatible a lot of backgrounds because then I have to dig through books, then I have to like look online for other backgrounds. So keeping it to the player's handbook keeps it simple. We're going to go with Sage. That is going to give us bonuses to our Constitution and Intelligence, and those are going to be important for any sort of spellcaster because your Intelligence modifier is going to be Intelligence, or your Intelligence modifier is going to be your spellcasting stat, and then your Constitution is going to help you on those con checks. For skills, you get Arcana and History, so again, 2 really good intelligence scores, so we're going to be doing that. You get Proficiency in Calligrapher's Supplies. And then the gold between the class. Okay, so here's the weird thing, is in the book, in the 2024 Player's Handbook, the classes all have you can get this gear or a flat sum of gold. In earlier books, it was you get this gear or you can get XD, in this case it's 5d4 times 10 gold. So all I did was I just did the 50 gold from the base and then I just maxed out the gold. I don't know if that's how your team will want to do it. If you do an Artificer, again, as always, talk to them. That gives you 250 gold to start with. And again, this is kind of why I wish they would just put it in the player's handbook. Just because I think it'd just be so much easier to just have the... species are pretty easy because you don't get a lot of things with the species. Like, it's going to give you your move speed. You might get, like, a resistance or, like literally... I don't think anyone gets more than like 4 or 5 abilities tops, and that's if you get a lot of things for the class. I think Aasimar get like the most text for their species, but otherwise, but with classes, there's so much to them, and you'll see as we get there. So the next thing we're going to get from our background is the Magic Initiate Wizard feat, which is perfect for us because a lot of the artificers have their own spell list. But a lot of Artificer spells are basically just wizard spells. So it makes sense. And then that's going to give us 2 cantrips and a spell. So for the cantrips, we are going to do True Strike, which is actually fixed. It used to be that True Strike would suck. In this case, this is going to be useful because it basically allows you to make a weapon attack with your intelligence rather than with your strength or dexterity, respectively. So, if you do have to use a weapon attack, you're just going to True Strike it. And the only time you're not going to be able to True Strike is if it's going to be like if you're silenced, or if you don't have the material component, or if your hands aren't free to do the somatic component, or anything like that. Those are going to be few and far between. So just use again, if you need to use a weapon, use True Strike. Next, Mending. Again, I'm imagining this person as a tinkerer. I think mending would be right up their alley. It's like, oh no, I broke my tool, mending. Oh no, I accidentally hit this thing too hard and broke, mending. And then, for the level 1 spell, we're going to choose Grease. That is more of a support spell. I always use Grease on Artificer. One campaign I did, it was a survival campaign. But because of a really good roll, I gave my players this little auto gnome that was in a crate that washed up on shore. and I basically made it an artificer, and his thing would be like, he could like repair stuff or do basic tasks around the camp while the player's out and explored. And again, it's only because someone got a nat 20 on that, and I'm like, okay, I gotta do this now. Uh, but I did it as Grease, and I always imagine, and this is like a good way you can use the flavor, is I imagine that, like, he's an auto gnome, so he's basically a robot. Like, he would put up his arm, and then, like, a little tube would pop out, and then at the end of the tube would be, like, a rune, and the rune would, produce the grease from the tube, So again, it's like, it's not that, the auto gnome had grease in his thing that he had to refill. It's that the spell generates grease, and then like he uses it to aim it. So it actually looks like he's shooting the grease, but really it's a spell. So again, like get creative like that. And again, you can code it as technology. You could easily code it as like, like maybe instead of like a spell casting wand, you have just like, like a gauntlet with a rune on it, and then like you can like say a certain word, the rune appears, and then you can like, shoot it like a spell. But again, entirely your choice. Alright. So as we established, we're a fairy. Now the other thing to keep in mind, most species are humanoids. There are some exceptions though. And as a fairy, you are considered a fae, not a humanoid. So if something says, like a good example, there was a spell on the paladin that allowed you to detect certain things, like celestials, fiends, and undead. So if there was a similar spell and it said fae in there, you would be detected. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, as for size, fairies, along with halflings and gnomes, are actually small. Their speed is 30 feet. However, it's 30 feet, but then they also get a fly speed equal to their actual speed. So you can actually fly 30 feet in a turn. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind. When you use your fly speed, it's coming out of all the speed. So your speed is actually 30. Like your fly speed is 30. So you can fly 30 feet, or you can walk 15 feet and then fly 15 feet, as an example. But you can't fly 30 feet and then walk 30 feet, because then you're doubling your move speed. Your speed will basically, or like an example, like let's say your flying speed was 40, but your walking speed was still 30. You can fly the 40 feet, but then you can't walk after that. But you can also fly 20 feet and then walk another 10 and then fly another 10. So, and again, once the monster manual comes out, I do want to do a series where I do like some demonstration combat so that you guys kind of get a better idea of how combat works. But we're waiting on that. February 18th is when that's going to come out, and I am waiting very impatiently for that. Alright. So next, species traits. You get fairy magic, which allows you to learn the Druidcraft cantrip. This one has basically been described as essentially Druid prestidigitation. It's a lot of kind of flavor stuff like that. But again, don't underestimate these kind of spells that don't have combat application. And then, of course, you get one of my favorites, Fairy Fire. And I mean, you're a fairy, of course you're going to get Fairy Fire. If you're a fairy and you didn't get Fairy Fire, what are you even doing? For languages, I'm doing something different. I'm going to do Common. I'm going to do Sylvan, because that's kind of like the Fey nature language. But then I'm also going to do Common Sign Language. That is something they have in the book. So I feel that would be a rather useful one to have. It's a little non-standard. But I think it's one of those things where, if you want to have the character that maybe doesn't speak Common but can speak in sign language, that would be a very useful thing. Again, the trick is you have to make sure that the rest of the party understands Common Sign Language. But that could be an interesting thing. Imagine this, oh god, That would be interesting. Like, how would verbal components work? Because I mean, the obvious thing is like, okay, you make the hand gestures, yeah, and that is the verbal component. But then, how would that work under silence? Because you're not technically saying anything. Like, you're able to kind of cast in silence. Maybe it's something to where like you have to at least like pretend like you're saying the word. Like, you have to go like, and then maybe just like because you're making the effort to say it. I don't know. It's one of those weird things you just have to talk to your DM because I don't know how they would want to run it. Um, but of course, like again, I would say if your DM says, "Oh no, you can't cast spells because you can't speak," don't play with that DM because that's really ableist, and at that point, they're being nitpicky about stupid things. If you want to play a spellcaster that can't speak and has to use sign language, like let them. All right, so I just took the wizard standard array, so we're going to do that. Strength is going to be 8, and it's a -1 because wizards do not need to be strong; they need to be smart. Dexterity is going to be a 12, and that's a +1. That's going to be good, especially with that armor. Those medium armors, a lot of their ACs are a flat AC plus a max of 2 from your dexterity. So if you can manage to get that bumped up to 1 somehow, that would be very useful, but it doesn't have to be. Next, Constitution, that's going to be our second most important score. So it's going to be a 13, but we're going to put the +1 from our background in it. So that's going to be 14, and that is going to be a +2 modifier. Intelligence is our next most important stat. That is, of course, going to be the 15 plus 2 for 17, and that is going to give us a +3. That gives us a nice, strong spellcasting modifier. Wisdom is going to be 14. That is also a nice +2 modifier. And then for Charisma, our Charisma is going to be the flat 10. That is a +0. No real bonuses or detractions, but again, like we can get those skills in there if we want and get a +2 to them from our proficiency at this level. So we'll do that. Next, moving on to the actual Artificer. Our hit die are going to be 3d8. That's 3d8 per level, or 1d8 per level, so we're level 3, it's 3d8. Hit points, again, this was not in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and it used to be that every class had their hit dice on their class page, or had their HP on their class page for what your HP would be at level 1 and then every level after that. So I had to go back and look that up. I'll link you a website that actually has a lot of the pre-5.5 information on species, classes, etc. And, a lot of good information there. So if you want to, make a species or make a class that you don't have a book for, you can go on there. Fairy was there. I do have the books for Fairy, but for me it's easier to just look online rather than dig through the book. So our max HP at level 1 is going to be 8 plus our modifier, so that's going to be 10 altogether. Then for each level after that, it's going to be 5 plus 2, so that's 7. 7 times 2 is 14, plus the 10 is a max HP of 24. Next, we get a bunch of tool proficiencies, because again, we are in Artificers. We got our Calligrapher's supplies, which we already have. We get Thieves' Tools. We're just going to go into the next level there. We got Tinker's Tools. And we have a Forgery Kit. Now, the way I'm imagining this is that, like, the Calligrapher's supplies are because, she makes all of her, like, blueprints and stuff for her technology, and, like, she, of course, has her little signature, calligrapher signature on the end, because part of calligraphy is, like, being able to make a signature that's hard to, or difficult to forge. Thieves' Tools and Tinker's Tools, I feel, are pretty self-explanatory. She's going to tinker, and then the Thieves' Tools are going to be something where, she's used to, like, the mechanical things of, like, locks and, like, the details of how those kind of things typically work. Forgery Kit, I imagine it's going to be, it kind of goes in line with calligrapher's supplies. She's gotten really good at making unforgeable signatures, and as a result, she's gotten really good at forging signatures too. So that would be like a nice little, again, it's a nice thing to have. It's not necessarily going to come up all the time, but it will come up sometimes. Now, our saves are going to be Constitution and Intelligence, which, wouldn't you know it, are just perfect for our wizard, who is smart and hardy. Next, skills, I went with Investigation and Nature. So between those, we have all the intelligence skills. Arcana, History, Investigation, Nature. The only one we don't have is Religion. And wouldn't you know it, I can't imagine why an artificer who, spends all their time tinkering with things probably doesn't concern themselves with things like the gods too much. You don't have to take Investigation in Nature, and you can go Religion. Maybe it's something to where, they're a dwarf, and, they're really big on, the gods of the forge for dwarves, but, again, up to you. In this case, it's a fairy, so that's not everything. Now, proficiencies. Now, this is where it gets tricky. Because in the book, in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and in, well, I guess Eberron doesn't really count because Eberron has guns by, nature of its setting. But for Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, they say firearms proficiency, and they have an asterisk, and they say talk to your DM, because your DM might not want firearms. And the thing is, and that's true. But here's the thing, is in the player's handbook, they don't even have, an optional thing for firearms. They have the rifle and the pistol on the weapons page with all the other weapons. Now, they do have, in the Dungeon Master's Guide for 2024, they do have, more modern weapons. So the pistol and, the rifle, they're more like flintlock kind of things, where, you're putting in a, one bullet at a time, or a musket where you're loading it. But then they do have, other ones where it's so if you want to do a setting where there's, machine guns, you can do that. They even have, futuristic weapons, like laser pistols. And the notes on the DMG for that say, treat these as magic weapons. But they do have the basic rifles in the player's handbook. So again, talk to your DM if firearms are something in your setting, or if he will allow you to make a magical not firearm. I don't see what the big deal is, especially because it is in the player's handbook, because I imagine if those are in the player's handbook, then they are also kind of play-tested for having that same level and not being ridiculously OP. But that said, you do get the firearm proficiency if there are firearms in your setting. We, for the sake of this character, are going to assume that there are firearms in our setting. So now, the next thing we get is we get magical tinkering. And this is also a kind of, this is also kind of a prestidigitation type thing. It allows you to do several effects that aren't necessarily combat or game changing, but they will allow you to do cool things. You can imbue a object to shine 5 feet of light. You can record a message on an object, and then when someone taps that message, they can replay it. So, you could probably put a stone somewhere, and then, leave it for your party if you're isolated somehow. You can, for lack of a better term, program the object to emit a continuous odor or nonverbal sound, such as, say, the sound of the ocean, or, the smell of a fire or something. Or you can have a visual effect, usually a non-mobile one, so it's like a projection almost. Again, nothing that's going to be combat breaking, but things that are useful to have from a roleplay and, game perspective. Now, all of these last indefinitely. You can do them on a number of objects equal to your intelligence modifier. So you can do these on up to 3 objects at level 3. And you can only have one effect per object, so you can't, you can't do multiples of them. That said, if you say half 3 and you do another effect on the 4th one, the first effect that you put on whatever object goes away. Okay, moving on. So now for spells, our spell save, or spellcasting modifier is intelligence. Let's do that. Our spell save is 8 plus 5 from our intelligence and our proficiency, so it's going to be 13 altogether. And then the spell attack bonus is just going to be the plus 5, so whenever you do those spell attack rolls, you're going to roll a d20, you're going to add 5 to it. That's what you get. And before I forget, let me put that proficiency bonus up there. For cantrips, I chose Thunderclap. And then I also chose Mage Hand. I feel like those are very useful. Thunderclap could easily be, again, flavored as technology. It's just a shockwave. So, maybe you have like 2 gloves and you can like pound them together and creates a shockwave. Or maybe your character actually made literal Hulk hands and there's these big gloves and you just boom. Again, if that's what you want to. Mage Hand, very useful wizard thing to have. As for level 1 spells, I went with Identify. I feel as the creator of magical items, you will be able to identify things. Detect Magic. Probably pretty useful if you want to make sure you're not blowing yourself up with magic. Alarm, again, not a very combat-oriented one, but it's one where if you want to make sure that your campsite is safe for the night, Alarm's going to do that. You can even make it like a ridiculous Rube Goldberg machine if you want. And then lastly, I went with Longstrider. I almost went with Disguise Self, because I was imagining it like a little holographic shroud type thing. But here's why I went with Longstrider. Because it specifically says in Fairy, you have a fly speed equal to your movement speed. So with Longstrider, you can increase your movement speed, which means your fly speed also goes up. So if you need to fly a little further than you would in a normal turn, you could do Longstrider, and not only can you walk further, you can also fly further. So that is also going to be a very nice one to have. Next thing you're going to get are your infusions. And this is where Artificers get really weird. Spellcasting in D&D has always been pretty dense. Infusions kind of make the Artificer a little more complicated because they're kind of like spells, but they're also not spells. Basically, at this level you can do 2 at a time. You can do more as you go later. But you're basically going to choose several infusions. There'll be a list on that website I link. And essentially it'll be things like you can enchant your shield to do like +2 AC, or you can enchant your boots to do this, or you can enchant your, something to act as a spellcasting post. Again, a bunch of different ones. And at this level, you get to choose 4. You basically get 2 at a time. And they last until you do a long rest. So the ones I chose, and I don't even know where to put them. I guess I'll put them off to the side here. So these are all infusions. These are all infusions you can do. The first one is Enhanced Defense. And this one gives you a +1 AC to an armor or a shield that you put it on. And these don't have to be yours, by the way. So, like, if you want your fighter, in heavy armor to be a little bit beefier, you can just put it on their armor. They get an extra AC. Done. Next is Repeating Shot. Now, there's a reason I chose this one, because this is going to go with our Gunslinger. So the way Repeating Shot works is you get +1 to attack with ranged weapons. You ignore the loading condition, which for guns is very important, because I imagine this character using guns. And what the loading property is the rule is that so you might have an ability that says you can attack twice with the attack action. Like you usually with a fighter, for example. If the weapon has the loading property, you can't do that. You can only attack once per action. Now, if you have something to where it says you can attack and then attack again as a bonus action, then you can do it twice, because each attack is associated with an action or a bonus action. But you can't attack 3 times as an action, even if you have an ability that allows you to make 3 attacks as an action. But with repeating shot, you can ignore that, so you can start just popping off those shots. And this is useful because the loading property goes with things like crossbows and with guns. So if you have multiple attacks, then you probably normally would go with, like a longbow or any sort of like regular bow and arrow. But with this, the repeating shot being able to ignore that loading property, very important. And the other thing is it causes the weapon to produce its own ammo, whether it's a bow or a gun. So you now have a gun. You don't have to worry about the ammo. That's useful. That's very useful. That speaks for itself. I don't know why you wouldn't do this. So you now have a laser gun basically. It can produce magic ammo. It's still going to be piercing, but take what you can get. And a lot of campaigns don't track ammo anyway, but if you have a campaign that does track ammo, that's going to make it useful. So next, Armor of Magical Strength. You get 6 charges, and what you can do is you can expend a charge, and you can add your intelligence modifier to a strength check or save. So it's one of those things where it's like, oh, there's this, giant thing I need to move. It's an athletics check, or I need to get out of being grappled. It's a strength saving throw. Oh, look, I just, pop it off from the armor, expend a charge. Oh, now suddenly my +1 gets a +3 added to it, so now I have a +2. There you go. Right there, we have negated essentially, you can use it to negate your strength, negative modifier. So, you know what, take it. So, Armor of Magical Strength. And lastly, Enhanced Arcane Focus. This one is a little less impressive, but essentially it is a +1 to all spell attack rolls. But you're a spellcaster, so it's one of those things where if you don't want to use your gun, use your spellcasting, you get a +1 anyway. So that right there, whether we are using our spell attacks or whether we are using our weapon, we now have a +1 to all of our attack rolls. So there you go. Enhanced Arcane Focus. And again, you can flavor those magical attacks as technology, or you can flavor them as like more magic based if you want. Again, entirely up to you. Next thing we get is Right Tool for the Job. Now, what this does is essentially you can create it takes an hour of prep, but if you expend an hour, you can create any set of tools for you to use, and like there you go. So here's what's useful. So we have all of these tools here that we are proficient in. I don't recall, but I don't think we get all of them. Like, we're going to get calligrapher supplies because those are tied to our background, and you get those by default, or even then we're going to buy them. But, with this armor, you're going to want to buy a weapon because we're going to want a gun. We're going to, we're going to want a gun. We're going to want an armor. We're going to definitely want the Tinker's tools because those are our spell casting focus. So let's say by the end of it all, we have to choose between either getting a forger kit or a thieves tool because we have all these other things we bought. Well, now you can spend, so like a forgery kit, that's not something you're going to use under pressure. So you can even use it in your downtime. So, as you go downtime, say, I'm going to use my Tinker tools to make a forgery kit, and then I'm going to use a forgery kit to forge an invite to the big party that we have to infiltrate. Bam. Thieves tools probably a little less so because those are things where you never know you're going to need them until you come across that locked door. So you might want to have those handy if you actually can. But again, like, there might be other tools that could be useful. So if you're an artificer, definitely look over the rules for tools in the 2024 Player's Handbook, because tools do a lot more than they did in the old one. A lot of these tools now have specific rules for them for what you can do and what modifier you're going to use and what skill you're going to use while using those tools. Okay, Now we get to the artillerist. See, this is a lot. We have just gotten to the subclass. So, with the artillerist, we're going to get yet another tool proficiency with woodcarver's tools. Again, not something you're going to want in combat. Maybe you want to go ahead and get those. So you get woodcarver's tools, and then as part of your subclass, you always have the shield and the Thunder Wave spells prepared, which are level 1 spells. Thunder Wave is a little bit like Thunderclap, they're slightly different, but they're essentially the same thing. It's a force damage. And then Shield, when you cast it as a reaction, gives you +5, I believe it is, to your AC. So that's something where if you're about to get hit with something, pop a shield. You know it's there, it's prepared, use it. Okay, next thing you get, and this is going to be the bread and butter, and this is where we are going to, really get into the artificer flavor here. You have the Eldritch Cannon. There are a lot of rules to this Eldritch Cannon. It has an AC of 18. It is immune to poison and psychic damage. All of its abilities are 10, because it's not going to be using its abilities to attack. It's going to be using just, whatever the thing says, which we'll get on those. And then if you use Mending on it, it can heal 2d6 HP, which, would you look at that? Our Artificer has Mending. We can heal our turret. But here's why it has those stats, because there's two ways you can use this turret. You can make it tiny, and it can be handheld, or you can make it medium, and it can be like a turret that has like legs and moves and repositions itself. It is entirely up to you which one of those you choose. Here's how I want to flavor it, because here's the important thing, is the way this works is that as a bonus action, if you're in 60 feet of your turret, or if you're holding your turret. If you're holding your turret, you're obviously in 60 feet. So you can use a bonus action to fire it, and with that same bonus action, you can also move it 15 feet, and it has a climb speed of 15 feet. So here's what I imagine. I don't imagine the mobile turret, although you could certainly do it that way. But I imagine that this fairy has her turret mounted on her shoulder. And what I'm really imagining is that, and again, there's a few different ways you can do this. Because if we're proficient in shields, we can have a shield. So we can have a shield and a gun. And a pistol. And we can still have our turret working. Because the only stipulation for that turret is that we use a bonus action. So there you go. The other thing I imagine, so I could say okay, if you want more defense, take the shield and use one gun. If you want to go full offense, you could dual wield and have and then have the turret. Now the trick is that dual wielding, the way it works is that if you use one, you can use the other as a bonus action. But the way the turret works, the turret isn't just an attack the way a second gun would. So you can have both guns out and then choose whether you want to use a regular gun or whether you want to use a turret. And that's what I'm imagining. And if you really want to get techie, I imagine it's, this fairy probably has a backpack, a little kind of techie backpack. And in addition to the thing, maybe it normally sits on her shoulder, but if she does want it to be a walking turret, it can eject from her pack, kind of like a Soundwave's Ravage and Laserbeak, and then, start climbing around or walking and, shooting what she wants to shoot. But here's the thing, is when you do that, you have to choose one of a few options about what kind of turret you want. And they all work different ways. So the first one is a flamethrower. Gosh, who wouldn't want a flamethrower in D&D? Does anyone ever say, no, I don't want a flamethrower? No, you want a flamethrower. So when you activate it as an attack, as a bonus action to attack something, it's a 15-foot cone. And anything in that 15-foot cone has to make a dexterity save against your spell save DC. They take 2d8 fire damage on a failure, and they take half as much if they succeed. So anything in that area is taking at least some damage. Hopefully they fail and they take full damage. But it's everything in the area, so, be careful of friendly fire. Don't let your party members on fire. Good DM advice to players, please don't let your other party members on fire. Next is you can make it a forced ballista, and it's a ranged spell attack at one creature or object, and it's in 120 feet of the turret. It takes 2d8 force damage if it hits, and it's pushed away 5 feet. So that right there is basically your laser cannon right there. So it's just, boom. Next, you can make it a protector. Basically, when you activate it, each creature of your choice in 10 feet of the turret gets temporary HP of 1d8 plus your intelligence modifier, which is 3. So they could get up to 11, anywhere from 4 to 11 temporary HP. Not exactly thrilling, but if you need to be a support, and this is something where like maybe if you don't have your cannon activated right away, you could move somewhere, activate your turret, have it move closer to someone that needs healing, give them those temporary hit points to kind of boost them up until they can get out of there. But yeah, so there you go. So that is the Eldritch Cannon. Again, there's a lot of rules to that. And then as you level, you can make improvements to like how far it can go and all that other stuff. But yeah, so that is our Artificer. Sorry, I'm not used to talking this long. But yeah, Artificers are a very dense class and a very dense subclass. Because again, with this Artificer alone, you not only have your spells, but you then have your infusions, and then you have your Eldritch Cannon, which all are like their own separate mechanics in themselves, and they're all kind of similar. Because the Eldritch Cannon, when you get down to it, is basically just spellcasting, but it's only certain spells from your turn. And then even with the Armorer, it's the same thing. Is you're going to have your spells, your infusions, and then you're going to have what type of armor you're picking, and like you can change it to stealth or heavy based on a long rest, I believe it is. The Alchemist, again, is very similar. They get this weird potion mechanic, but again, it's the same thing. It's like every morning you're brewing potions. The problem with the Alchemist subclass is that the potions they get aren't very good. Like you basically get a very weak healing potion, which is good at lower levels, but once you start getting into like the 5, 6, 7, 8 plus levels, it starts to slowly drop off how useful that healing is. And then again, like the Tinkerer one, Battlesmith. There we go, the Battlesmith, and the Battlesmith, gets their pet, and like their pet gets bigger. But the pet is probably a less complicated mechanic than like the Eldritch Cannon. Because my understanding is that the mechanical pet, it's basically always going to be the mechanical pet. It's just it gets better with like more HP or more damage. But at the same time, it's like you don't have to worry about choosing, whether it does a flamethrower, whether it does a shockwave, whether it heals. So it's a little less complicated in that regard. But again, like our Artificers, like I really wish Wizards of the Coast would like give, do them more justice, because they can be really fun. And I feel like they've really struggled because again, there's that stigma of, oh well, I don't want technology in my campaign, like, or high technology in my campaign, or the fact that like the Alchemist is not that great of a subclass, or the fact that it can kind of be confusing between having the infusions and the spells and the turret. And it's doable. It's doable. Like people can learn this class. It's not a difficult class to learn, but it is going to be harder than, say, a fighter whose job is to hit things multiple times, or a wizard who has this massive spell list. Like Artificers don't get a huge spell list, but that's because the Artificers thing is they get like all these nice magical items that they can put on themselves. They can basically, at one point, they can actually basically just make low-level magical items. So, again, that's what we have here. Definitely give artificers a shot. Like again, in DMs, I will say this: DMs out there, if you have a low magic thing, like let's pretend you are playing absolute caveman, let your players play artificers, and let them flavor it in a prehistoric way. You know, maybe it's an artificer that's like making these Rube Goldberg machines out of like bamboo and wood and like water, and then just magic. Like honestly, like the grease thing. And actually, this would be a really good point. Uh, One of the things in the wizard subclass is you can have an arcane focus, or you can have like the pouch of components. Let the artificer take the pouch of components, be like, okay, I need to cast grease. They reach into their pocket, they smush a bunch of leaves together, with their hands, and the Tinker's tool. Like, you don't need to necessarily give them Tinker's tool, or like maybe they have like the bowl and the pestle, so they're like really quickly doing that, and then taking the sludge out and then throwing it, while casting the spell, and that becomes the grease. Like there are ways to flavor this for low magic, and I think it really sucks when DMs say, I really don't like it when DMs say, I don't want anyone to play class, or I don't want anyone to play race. Now, I think with certain settings, like race can be a particularly tricky thing. Like, if you want to make a setting where, like, the Dragonborn have gone extinct, and, someone is holding out hope of finding, like, the last remaining Dragonborn because there's some prophecy that they need to retake the throne because they used to rule the world or something. Like, again, you can have that, or have, like, the Dragonborn be so rare, or maybe they're all in hiding, like, maybe they have to disguise themselves as, like, lizardmen or something. But again, it's like, I also don't like campaigns that necessarily do that, because you're basically telling your players, you don't get to be creative in this regard, you don't have this option. I like to give my players options. I think it's absolutely cool. You know what? Here's an idea. Here's an idea for like if you want a low technology setting, but actually, and the player like really insists on having it be coded as technology. You could have them come from the future, and then just like mechanically, it all works the same. And it's like, you don't have to worry about ammo because, oh look, their gun doesn't use ammo because they have the repeating shot infusion. So they could do that. And then to all the primitives of the world, like it all looks like magic. They just think it's magic. Dr. Stone is a good example. Like this last season that just came out on Netflix. That was a good one because Senku Ishigami. He's using like technology. He's not using magic. He's using technology. But all these people who haven't seen technology in years, they see it and they think, oh, this is just a form of sorcery. Because, as Isaac Asimov said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So the inverse is true too. Any sufficiently advanced magic is going to be indistinguishable from technology. Even in some of the D&D books, I think it's Keys to the Golden Vault, which again, like, is kind of canon with Forgotten Realms. They have a shower where, there's like basically like a symbol to heat the water. So, you press it, the water comes out, it gets heated, and you have a hot shower. You have a hot shower in a fantasy setting. Not like, it's not Geralt sitting in a tub with a fire below heating the water. It is a hot shower coming from a shower head. So get creative. And I mean, especially in like something like the Forgotten Realms that has had magic for however many hundreds of years in game lore. It's like people are going to get creative with these spells. Like here's the thing: is like, even if they don't do it as technology, there's going to be people who fill it up with water, use a spell to heat it, and take a hot bath. Heck, they can use magic to create the water. They don't even need to get it from anywhere. They can just go, Oh, I'm gonna use I'm gonna cast Create Water to put water in my tub. And if you're a wizard, you can do that. No one's gonna stop you. So again, DMs out there, let your players play artificers. It doesn't have to be technology, and even if it is technology, like you can get creative with that. Like again, talk to your players, come to an understanding. Because the one thing you don't want is the DM saying, "Okay, you can play an artificer, but I don't want it coded as technology. I want it coded as magic." And then the player comes with the artificer coded as technology, and instead of having the artificial coded as magic, because then you do have the problem of like your DM set this expectation that you can play this, but it's not going to be magic, or but it's not going to be technology. It's going to be magic. So work together, guys. Have fun. Like this is what D&D is for, man. Like just have fun. Tell a story together. Get creative with each other. Don't shut each other down. Like this is where the yes and part of the D&D improv comes in. Your job is like, hey, I want to play yes an artificer. Yes, and okay, it's like the wooden planks with runes on them or something, or it's like, oh, you're just mixing something together with your components. Get creative, have fun. Like if there is one rule of D&D, it's not about the dice rolls, it's not about the mechanics, it's not about anything. It's have fun. So I'm going to leave you guys with that little bit of wisdom. As always, please do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. I'm really trying to get my channel off the ground. I've been doing this for like almost close to half a year now. It doesn't feel like that. I feel like I still just started yesterday. But I want this channel to go places, and I want to start doing cooler things for this channel. But of course, I appreciate any support you guys can give. And as always, keep doing what makes you awesome. Thank you very much, and goodbye.